I knew something was wrong the second I pulled into my driveway and saw the empty spot where my Ducati Panigale V4 should have been sitting. My heart dropped straight into my stomach as I killed the engine of my truck and sat there staring at the vacant space like somehow my bike would materialize if I looked hard enough. I had parked that motorcycle in the exact same spot in my driveway for the past 2 years, and now it was just gone. I jumped out of my truck and walked around the side of my house, thinking maybe I had somehow forgotten and parked it in the backyard or something equally stupid. But no, my brain was working fine. The bike had been right there when I left for work that morning, and now it was not. I pulled out my phone and started to dial the police when I noticed something tucked under my windshield wiper. A bright orange piece of paper fluttered in the Phoenix afternoon breeze. The notice was printed on official-looking letterhead that read, Sunset Hills Homeowners Association, at the top. My hands started shaking as I read the words. According to this piece of paper, my motorcycle had been towed at 9:30 this morning for violation of HOA Code Section 4.7, subsection C, which apparently prohibited the parking of motorcycles in driveways visible from the street. The notice was signed by one Patricia Whitmore, HOA board president. I had lived in this neighborhood in Scottsdale, Arizona, for 2 years. I had parked my motorcycle in my driveway for every single one of those 730 days. Not once had anyone said a word to me about it. I paid my HOA dues on time every month, kept my lawn maintained, made sure my trash cans were put away properly, and generally tried to be a good neighbor. And now, without any warning, without any prior notice, they had just towed my $40,000 motorcycle. I immediately called the towing company listed on the notice. A gruff voice answered after 3 rings. Yeah, this is Big Mike's Towing. Hi, my motorcycle was towed from my house this morning. I need to know where it is and how to get it back. Address. I gave him my address and heard him typing on a keyboard. Yeah, we got a Ducati here, red one, pretty nice bike, that yours? Yes, that's mine. Where do I pick it up? Impound lot on East Thomas Road. But you cannot get it until you pay the towing fee and storage. How much? $350 for the tow, and then it is $50 a day for storage. I felt my blood pressure rising. It has only been there for a few hours. Still counts as a day, so that is $400 total. This is ridiculous. I did not even authorize this tow. Do not need your authorization, buddy. HOA requested it. You got a problem, take it up with them. We are just doing our job. I hung up and immediately started searching through my documents for the HOA bylaws. I had received a thick packet when I bought the house, but like most people, I had skimmed it and then filed it away. Now I was pulling it out and flipping through page after page of rules and regulations. Finally, I found Section 4.7. The section covered parking regulations. Subsection A dealt with RVs and trailers. Subsection B covered commercial vehicles. And there was subsection C in black and white. No motorcycles shall be parked in driveways or other areas visible from public streets or common areas. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The rule was there. But how had I never known about it? More importantly, why had they waited 2 years to enforce it? I kept reading and found another section that was very interesting. Section 12.3 stated that before any enforcement action could be taken for a violation, the homeowner must be given written notice and a period of 14 days to remedy the violation. Only after that period could fines or other actions be taken. I had never received any written notice. No letter in my mailbox, no email, no phone call. Nothing. They had just gone straight to towing my bike without any warning whatsoever. That seemed wrong, but I needed to be sure. I grabbed my laptop and started researching Arizona HOA laws. What I found made me even angrier. According to Arizona revised statutes, specifically Section 33-1803, an HOA must provide reasonable notice before taking enforcement action. The law required written notice to be sent to the homeowner, giving them a chance to correct any violation. Towing a vehicle without any prior notice did not seem to fit within the bounds of reasonable enforcement. I decided to call the HOA management company. The number was listed on the towing notice. A pleasant female voice answered. Sunset Hills HOA, this is Jennifer speaking. How may I help you? Hi Jennifer, my name is Xavier Stanton, and I live at 4782 Desert Bloom Drive. My motorcycle was towed from my driveway this morning, and I never received any prior notice about any violation. Oh yes, Mr. Stanton. Let me pull up your account, I heard typing. Yes, I see here that your vehicle was towed this morning for parking violation. Right, but I never got any warning. Does not the HOA have to give notice before doing something like this? That would be a question for the board president, Patricia Whitmore. Would you like me to give you her contact information? Yes, please. She rattled off a phone number and email address. I thanked her and immediately dialed Patricia's number. It rang 4 times and then went to voicemail. Her voice was exactly what I expected, that particular tone that some middle-aged women get when they are used to being in charge and having people listen to them. You have reached Patricia Whitmore, president of the Sunset Hills Homeowners Association Board. Please leave a detailed message and I will return your call at my earliest convenience. I tried to keep my voice level. Miss Whitmore, this is Xavier Stanton from 4782 Desert Bloom Drive. My motorcycle was towed from my driveway this morning without any prior notice or warning. I need to speak with you about this immediately. Please call me back. I left my number and hung up. Then I sent her an email saying basically the same thing. And then I sat down and tried to figure out my next move. I needed to get my bike back, but I also needed to make sure this was handled properly. If the HOA had violated the law by towing my vehicle without notice, they should be responsible for the costs, not me. An hour went by with no call back. Then 2 hours. I called Patricia's number again and got voicemail again. I was starting to get really frustrated. Finally, at 5:15 in the afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia's number. Hello, is this Xavier Stanton? The voice was cold and clipped. Yes, this is Xavier. Is this Patricia Whitmore? It is. I received your rather aggressive messages about your motorcycle. Aggressive? My $40,000 bike was towed without any warning. I think I have a right to be upset. Mr. Stanton, you are in violation of HOA Code Section 4.7 subsection C. The board has the authority to enforce our covenants and restrictions. I understand there is a rule about motorcycles, but I was never notified about any violation before the tow. According to the HOA bylaws and Arizona state law, you are supposed to give written notice and time to correct the violation. Mr. Stanton, I can assure you that we followed all proper procedures. Then you can show me the notice you sent me. There was a pause. The board made the decision that your violation was egregious enough to warrant immediate action. Egregious. It has been parked there for 2 years. If it was such a problem, why did no one say anything before now? The board has been conducting a neighborhood compliance sweep. We are enforcing rules that have been lax in the past. Many homeowners have been notified of violations. But I was not notified. You just towed my motorcycle without saying anything to me first. Mr. Stanton, you signed the CC and Articus when you purchased your home. Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse. I felt my jaw clenching. I am not claiming ignorance. I am saying you did not follow the proper procedure. You cannot just tow someone's vehicle without notice. Mr. Stanton, if you wish to dispute this enforcement action, you may request a hearing with the board. The next meeting is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. What am I supposed to do about my motorcycle in the meantime? I suggest you retrieve it from the impound lot and park it in your garage or somewhere else that is not visible from the street. And who is paying the $400 towing and storage fee? That would be your responsibility as the homeowner in violation. I took a deep breath, trying not to lose my temper completely. Miss Whitmore, let me be very clear. I will be retrieving my motorcycle, but I will not be paying these fees because your HOA violated state law by not providing proper notice. I will be disputing this, and if necessary, I will take legal action. Mr. Stanton, I would caution you against making threats. The board takes a very dim view of homeowners who refuse to follow the rules. And I take a very dim view of HOAs that think they are above the law. You will be hearing from me again. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking with anger. The dismissive tone in her voice, the complete unwillingness to even consider that maybe they had done something wrong, it was infuriating. But getting angry was not going to help. I needed to be smart about this. I drove to the impound lot to see my motorcycle. When I got there, I found my beautiful Ducati sitting among a bunch of beat-up cars and trucks. Just seeing it there made my blood boil again. I walked into the office where a large man with a thick beard sat behind a counter. I am here about my motorcycle, the red Ducati. You got the 400. Before I pay anything, I need to document the condition of the bike. Your company towed it without proper authorization. The man shrugged. That is between you and whoever called us. We just do the towing. I understand, but I need to make sure there is no damage before any money changes hands. He sighed and grabbed a set of keys. Come on. We walked out to where my bike was sitting. I did a thorough inspection, taking photos with my phone from every angle. The bike looked okay, no obvious scratches or damage, but I would need to start it and really check it out to be sure. I took photos of the odometer, the VIN number, everything. Can I start it? No starting vehicles in the lot. Insurance rules. Fine. But I am noting that I was not allowed to fully inspect the motorcycle before taking possession. The guy just shrugged again. We went back to the office and I very reluctantly handed over my credit card for the $400. He processed the payment and gave me a receipt. You can take it any time. I need to come back with my trailer. I am not riding it out of here until I can properly inspect it. Another shrug. I left the impound lot feeling even more angry than before. This whole situation was wrong, and I was going to make it right. Over the next few days, I did my research. I found a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes, a guy named Robert Chen who had an office in Scottsdale. I called and made an appointment for the following Tuesday. In the meantime, I retrieved my motorcycle from the impound lot using a trailer I borrowed from my buddy Marcus. Once I got it home, I did a thorough inspection. The bike seemed okay mechanically, but there were a few small scratches on the fairing that I was pretty sure had not been there before. Nothing major, but still damage that had occurred while in the custody of the towing company. I documented everything with photos and notes. I also went through my files and confirmed that I had never received any notice from the HOA about the motorcycle. No letters, no emails, nothing. I had my email archives going back years, and I searched for anything from the HOA. The only communications I had were the monthly statements for HOA dues and a few general notices about neighborhood events. Nothing about my motorcycle. My appointment with Robert Chen was at 10 in the morning on Tuesday. His office was in a nice building near Old Town Scottsdale. Robert himself was a sharp-looking guy in his 40s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. We shook hands and he invited me into his office. "So Xavier, tell me what happened." I walked him through the whole situation, from coming home to find my bike gone to the conversations with Patricia Whitmore. I showed him the towing notice, the HOA bylaws, and my documentation showing I had never received any prior written notice. He listened carefully, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Okay, this is pretty straightforward from a legal perspective. The HOA violated Arizona Revised Statutes Section 33-1803 by not providing you with reasonable notice before taking enforcement action. They also violated their own bylaws, which require 14 days notice before enforcement. You have a solid case. So what do? First, we send them a demand letter. We lay out the violations of law and their own rules, and we demand that they reimburse you for all costs associated with the towing and any damages to the motorcycle. We also demand that they cease any further enforcement actions related to this issue. And if they refuse, then we file a lawsuit. Based on what you have told me, we would be suing for the cost of the towing, the cost of the damage to the motorcycle, and potentially additional damages for the violation of the statute. We might also be able to get attorney's fees, because Arizona law allows for that in HOA disputes where the HOA acts improperly. How much are we talking about in terms of your fees? I can write the demand letter for a flat fee of $500. If we have to file suit, we would be looking at a retainer of $3,000 to start, but again, we would seek to recover those fees from the HOA if we win. I thought about it for a moment. $500 to send a letter seemed worth it, especially if there was a chance the HOA would just pay up and make this go away. Let's do the demand letter. Great. I will draft something and send it to you for review, probably by the end of the week. Once you approve it, I will send it certified mail to the HOA board and their management company. We shook hands again, and I left his office feeling like maybe I was finally getting somewhere. At least I had someone on my side who knew what they were doing. Robert was true to his word. By Friday afternoon, I had an email from him with a draft demand letter attached. It was 3 pages of legal language that basically said the HOA had screwed up, violated the law, and needed to pay me back for all my costs. It demanded reimbursement for the $400 towing fee, $300 for repairs to the scratches on my motorcycle, and compensation for my time and trouble. The total demand was for $1,200, plus an agreement that they would not take any further enforcement action regarding my motorcycle without following proper procedures. I read through it carefully and sent him my approval. He said he would get it in the mail on Monday. Now I just had to wait and see how the HOA would respond. The following Wednesday I got a call from Robert. I just got a response from the HOA's attorney. That was fast. Yeah, they have a law firm on retainer. The attorney's name is David Morrison. He sent me a letter rejecting your demand. On what grounds? He claims that the HOA did provide notice. He says they posted a notice on the community bulletin board and on the HOA website about the compliance sweep, and that constitutes sufficient notice to all homeowners. I felt my anger rising again. That is ridiculous. A general notice about a compliance sweep is not the same as specific notice to me about my motorcycle. I agree completely. That is not what the law requires. The statute and their bylaws require specific written notice to the homeowner about the specific violation. A general posting does not cut it. So what is our next step? We file suit. Are you ready to move forward with that? I thought about the $3,000 retainer. It was a lot of money, but this was about principle now. The HOA could not just bully people and ignore the law. Yes, let's do it. Okay. I will start drafting the complaint. I will need you to come in and sign some paperwork, probably early next week. Over the next couple of weeks, Robert filed a lawsuit against the Sunset Hills Home Owners Association in Maricopa County Superior Court. The complaint laid out all the facts and alleged that the HOA had violated Arizona law, breached its own governing documents, and wrongfully caused my motorcycle to be towed. We were suing for the towing costs, the damage to the motorcycle, attorney's fees, and punitive damages. I knew from talking to Robert that these cases could take a while. He warned me that it might be 6 months or more before we got to trial. But I was committed to seeing it through. In the meantime, I made sure to park my motorcycle in my garage, even though it was a pain. My garage was full of stuff, and I had to rearrange everything to make room. But I was not going to give Patricia Whitmore any excuse to come after me again. About a month after we filed the lawsuit, I got another call from Robert. "Xavier, I just got a settlement offer from the HOA's attorney." "Already?" "Yeah, I think they are realizing they are on shaky ground here. They are offering to pay the $400 towing fee and drop any future enforcement action regarding your motorcycle." "That is it. What about the damage to my bike? What about my attorney's fees?" "That is what I told Morrison. I rejected the offer on your behalf and told him we want the full $1,200 plus attorney's fees, which are now up to around $4,000. "What did he say?" "He said he would get back to me. My guess is they will come back with another offer." Sure enough, 2 weeks later, Robert called again. "They are up to $800, plus they will waive the parking restriction for your property specifically, but still no attorney's fees." "That is not good enough. They violated the law, they should pay for all of it." "I agree. I will tell them we are moving forward with the lawsuit." As we got deeper into the legal process, I had to give a deposition. That meant sitting in a conference room with Robert, the HOA's attorney David Morrison, and a court reporter, answering questions under oath about everything that had happened. Morrison tried to trip me up a few times, asking when I had first read the HOA bylaws and whether I had seen the general notice about the compliance sweep. But I stuck to the truth. I told him I had skimmed the bylaws when I bought the house, but had never received specific notice about my motorcycle being in violation. And no, I had not seen any general notice because I did not regularly check the HOA website or the community bulletin board. The deposition lasted about 3 hours and I left feeling drained. But Robert told me I had done well and that my testimony was consistent and credible. A few weeks later, Patricia Whitmore had to give her deposition. Robert let me sit in on it, which turned out to be very interesting. Patricia showed up wearing a business suit and an expression like she had just smelled something bad. She was in her early 50s, with short blonde hair styled in a severe cut and thin lips that seemed permanently pursed in disapproval. Robert started with basic background questions about her role as HOA president and how long she had been on the board. Patricia answered in clipped, precise tones. Then Robert started asking about the compliance sweep. "Miss Whitmore, when did the board decide to conduct this compliance sweep?" "In January of this year. We held a special board meeting to discuss enforcement of our covenants and restrictions." "And what prompted this decision?" "The board felt that certain rules had not been adequately enforced in recent years. We wanted to restore compliance throughout the community." "Did the board discuss how they would notify homeowners of violations?" "We discussed posting a general notice to inform the community that we would be conducting inspections." Did you discuss providing specific written notice to individual homeowners before taking enforcement action? Patricia shifted in her seat slightly. The board's position was that homeowners are responsible for knowing and following the rules. We felt that a general notice was sufficient. But you are aware that Section 12.3 of your own bylaws requires 14 days written notice before enforcement action. That section applies to fines and penalties. We determined that it did not apply to immediate hazards or egregious violations. You considered Mr. Stanton's motorcycle parked in his driveway to be an immediate hazard. We considered it an egregious violation. The motorcycle had been there for years in violation of our rules. If it had been there for years, why was it suddenly urgent enough to tow without notice in March? Patricia's lips pressed together even tighter. The board made a decision to enforce the rules uniformly. We were not going to allow violations to continue. But you did allow them to continue for years. And then you towed Mr. Stanton's motorcycle without any specific notice to him. Is that correct? We provided general notice to the community. Miss Whitmore, did you personally send any letter, email, or other communication directly to Xavier Stanton informing him that his motorcycle was in violation before it was towed? There was a long pause. No. Did anyone else on the board send such a communication? Not to my knowledge. Did the management company send such a communication? No. So the first time Mr. Stanton knew there was any issue with his motorcycle was when he came home and found it had been towed, correct? He should have known the rules. Please answer the question, Miss Whitmore. The first time Mr. Stanton was informed of any issue was after the tow, correct? Yes. Robert made a note on his legal pad. Let's talk about the decision to tow the motorcycle. Who made that decision? I did, as board president. Did you consult with the HOA's attorney before ordering the tow? Another pause. No. Did you review Arizona state law regarding HOA enforcement procedures? I am familiar with our rights and responsibilities as a board. That was not my question. Did you specifically review Arizona Revised Statutes Section 33-1803 before ordering the tow? I do not recall. Did you review Section 12.3 of your own bylaws? I am familiar with our bylaws. Did you review that specific section before ordering the tow? Patricia's face was starting to flush. As I said, the board determined that section did not apply in this case. When did the board make that determination? It was discussed at our meeting, the meeting in January. Yes. So 3 months before Mr. Stanton's motorcycle was towed. Yes. And in those 3 months, did it occur to you or anyone else on the board to send specific notices to homeowners before taking action against them? We felt the general notice was adequate. Robert kept pressing, and the more he pressed, the more obvious it became that Patricia and the board had simply decided they did not need to follow their own rules or state law. They had convinced themselves that because they were in charge, they could do whatever they wanted. It was exactly the kind of HOA overreach that gave these organizations a bad reputation. After the deposition, Robert and I stood in the parking lot talking. That went very well for us, he said. She basically admitted they did not follow proper procedures and did not even consult with their attorney before taking action. You think they will settle now? I would hope so. If this goes to trial, they are going to lose. The question is whether they are smart enough to realize that. 2 more months went by. We did more discovery, exchanging documents and written questions. Robert deposed another board member, a guy named Harold Simmons, who basically admitted he had just gone along with whatever Patricia wanted. The HOA's attorney deposed my neighbor, trying to find out if he had ever complained to me about the motorcycle. My neighbor, A retired guy named Phil told them he had no problem with my bike and thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Finally, in early October, we got a trial date. The case was set for November 15th. Robert started preparing in earnest, drafting witness lists and exhibit lists. He told me we had a strong case, but you never knew what might happen at trial. Juries could be unpredictable. Then, on October 23rd, I got a call from Robert that changed everything. "Xavier, I just got a call from David Morrison. The HOA wants to have a serious settlement discussion." "What changed?" "I think Patricia Whitmore is finally understanding the risk they are facing." Morrison told me that they have had to hire an expert witness to testify about HOA procedures, and the expert basically told them their position is indefensible. Plus, their insurance company is apparently putting pressure on them to settle because they do not want to pay out a big judgment. So what are they offering? They want to have a mediation. It is a process where both sides sit down with a neutral third-party mediator and try to work out a settlement. If we cannot reach an agreement, we still go to trial, but mediation is often effective in resolving cases like this. I am willing to try it, but I am not accepting anything less than full compensation for everything they put me through. Understood. Let me set it up. The mediation was scheduled for November 2nd at the mediator's office in Phoenix. The mediator was a retired judge named Susan Reeves, who had a reputation for being fair but tough. Robert and I showed up at 9 in the morning. Patricia Whitmore was there with David Morrison and another board member named Janet Liu. We all gathered in a conference room, and Judge Reeves explained how the process would work. "I have reviewed the pleadings and key documents in this case," she began. "I want to start by saying that I am not here to judge who is right or wrong. My job is to help you find a resolution that both sides can live with. We will start with each side giving a brief presentation of their position. Then I will meet with each side separately, and we will see if we can find common ground. This can take several hours, so I ask for your patience." David Morrison went first. He argued that the HOA had the right to enforce its rules and that Xavier Stanton had been in violation for years. He claimed that the general notice about the compliance sweep was sufficient and that the HOA had acted within its authority. Then Robert gave our side. He walked through the Arizona statute, requiring reasonable notice, the HOA's own bylaws requiring 14 days written notice, and the complete lack of any specific notice to me before the tow. He showed photos of the scratches on my motorcycle and presented evidence of what I had paid for towing and storage. He also noted that my attorney's fees were now over $6,000 and climbing. Judge Reeves listened to both sides without showing much reaction. Then she said, "Thank you both. I am going to meet with each side privately now. Mr. Morrison, Miss Whitmore, Miss Liu, you will stay here. Mr. Chen and Mr. Stanton, please come with me to the other conference room." Robert and I followed her down the hall to another room. Once we were seated, Judge Reeves gave us a frank assessment. "You have a very strong case. The HOA clearly did not follow proper procedures, but litigation is expensive and time-consuming. What would it take for you to settle this today?" Robert looked at me and I spoke up. "I want full reimbursement for the $400 I paid to get my bike out of impound. I want $300 for the damage to the bike. I want my attorney's fees covered. And I want a formal apology from the board and a guarantee that they will follow proper procedures in the future." Judge Reeves made notes. "What about the attorney's fees? What is the current total?" $6,200, Robert said. "So you are looking for around $7,000 total?" "Yes," I said, "and the apology and policy change. Let me go talk to the other side." She left, and Robert and I sat there waiting. About 30 minutes later, she came back. They are willing to pay the $400 for towing and the $300 for damages. They are willing to agree to follow proper procedures in the future. But they are balking at the attorney's fees and the apology. Why no apology? I asked. Miss Whitmore is concerned about admitting wrongdoing. She is worried about liability. She is worried about looking bad, you mean, I said. This whole thing is about her ego. Judge Reeves did not disagree. Let me work on them some more. This went on for several hours. Judge Reeves would shuttle back and forth between the two rooms, carrying offers and counteroffers. The HOA came up to $2,000 in attorney's fees, then $3,000. But they absolutely refused to go higher or to give a formal apology. By 2 in the afternoon, I was getting frustrated. They violated the law, I told Judge Reeves during one of her visits to our room. They should pay full attorney's fees. That is what the statute allows for. I understand your position, she said, but they are taking a hard line. The question is whether you want to roll the dice at trial or take what you can get now. Robert and I talked it over. If we go to trial, what do you think we get? I asked him. I think we win on liability. I think the judge awards you the $700 for costs and damages. I think we get attorney's fees, but the judge might not give us every penny. Judges sometimes reduce fee awards if they think the amount is excessive. We might get $4,000 or $5,000 instead of the full $6,000+. And then there is the time and expense of actually going to trial. We would need to pay the expert witness, which is another $2,000. We would need to spend time preparing and sitting through the trial. But we would get a judgment on the record that they violated the law. Yes. That is the benefit of going to trial. You get vindication. I thought about it. The money was important, but it was not really what this was about anymore. It was about principle. It was about holding the HOA accountable. I want to go to trial, I said finally. Judge Reeves nodded. I understand. Let me tell the other side. She left again. Robert and I packed up our things, expecting that to be the end of it. But 20 minutes later, Judge Reeves came back looking thoughtful. I told them you are walking away from the table. Miss Whitmore is still refusing to budge. But Mr. Morrison asked for a few minutes to confer with his clients privately. I think he is trying to convince them to be more reasonable. We waited another 30 minutes. Finally, Judge Reeves came back with Morrison right behind her. He looked tired. We have a final offer, Morrison said. The HOA will pay the $700 in costs and damages. They will pay $5,000 in attorney's fees. And they will agree in writing to revise their enforcement procedures to ensure proper notice is given before any future towing action. But no formal apology. I looked at Robert. He shrugged slightly, leaving it up to me. I thought about it. The money would more than cover what I had spent, and Robert would get most of his fees. The policy change would help other homeowners in the future, but the lack of an apology still bothered me. It felt like Patricia was refusing to admit she had done anything wrong. What about a statement in the settlement agreement acknowledging that proper notice was not provided in my case? I asked. Morrison hesitated. Let me check. He left and came back 10 minutes later. They will agree to language saying that the HOA acknowledges that specific written notice should have been provided prior to the towing action. That is as far as they will go. It was not quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Okay, I said. We have a deal. Everyone seemed to relax. Judge Reeves had her assistant bring in a draft settlement agreement that she had already prepared. We spent the next hour going through it and making sure all the terms were correct. Both sides signed it, and just like that, it was over. As we were leaving, I saw Patricia Whitmore in the hallway. She would not make eye contact with me. Janet Liu, the other board member, gave me a small nod that might have been apologetic. but Patricia just turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. Outside in the parking lot, Robert and I shook hands. "Congratulations," he said. "You stood up for yourself and you won. Thanks for all your help. I could not have done this without you. Happy to help." And hopefully that settlement will make them think twice before pulling something like this again. I drove home feeling a mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. The whole ordeal had taken 7 months from start to finish, but I had won. The HOA had to acknowledge they were wrong, they had to pay me, and they had to change their policies. It was not perfect, but it was justice. A week later, I received a check for $5,700, along with a signed copy of the settlement agreement. I paid Robert the balance of what I owed him, and I still had money left over. More importantly, I had made my point. But the story was not quite over yet. About 2 weeks after the settlement, I got a call from my neighbor Phil. "Xavier, you need to see this. There is a new notice posted on the HOA bulletin board." I walked down to the community clubhouse where the bulletin board was located. Sure enough, there was a new notice posted in large print. It announced that the HOA board would be holding a special meeting to discuss enforcement procedures, and that all homeowners were invited to attend and provide input. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening. I decided to go. I was curious to see if the settlement had actually changed anything. Thursday evening, I walked into the clubhouse meeting room. It was surprisingly full, with maybe 40 or 50 homeowners sitting in folding chairs. Patricia Whitmore sat at a table at the front of the room with Janet Liu and Harold Simmons, and 2 other board members I did not recognize. Patricia called the meeting to order and began reading from a prepared statement. "The board has undertaken a comprehensive review of our enforcement procedures. As part of that review, we have implemented new policies to ensure that homeowners receive proper notice before any enforcement action is taken. Going forward, any homeowner found to be in violation will receive written notice by certified mail giving them 30 days to correct the violation before any fines or other actions are imposed." She read through several more policy changes, all designed to add more due process to the enforcement procedures. She never mentioned my name or the lawsuit, but it was clear that the settlement had driven these changes. When she finished reading, she opened the floor to questions. Several homeowners raised their hands. One woman asked about the motorcycle parking rule. "I heard that someone in the neighborhood had their bike towed. Is that rule still in effect?" Patricia's face tightened slightly. "The rule remains in the covenants and restrictions. However, the board is currently reviewing all of our parking restrictions to determine whether modifications are appropriate. We will be sending out a survey to all homeowners in the coming weeks to get input." Another man raised his hand. "I think that rule is outdated. A lot of us have motorcycles. As long as they are maintained properly, I do not see the problem." Several other people voiced agreement. I could see Patricia becoming more uncomfortable. She tried to move on to other topics, but people kept coming back to the motorcycle rule and other parking restrictions that seemed overly restrictive. Finally, an older woman in the back stood up. "I think the real issue here is that the board has been enforcing rules without talking to the rest of us. We all pay dues, we all have a say. Maybe it is time for the board to be more transparent and get more input before making decisions." There was applause. Patricia looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. She wrapped up the meeting quickly after that, promising to send out the survey and consider all feedback. As people were filing out, several neighbors came up to me. Phil introduced me to a few of them. "This is Xavier Stanton. He is the one who fought the board over his motorcycle." A younger guy named Eric shook my hand. Dude, I heard about that. Good for you for standing up to them. Patricia has been way too aggressive with this enforcement stuff. A woman named Teresa nodded. She towed my daughter's car last year because it was parked on the street overnight. Never gave us any warning, just towed it. Cost us $200 to get it back. Did you fight it? I asked. No, we just paid it. I wish I had known you could actually do something about it. I told them about the settlement and how the HOA had violated state law by not providing notice. If something like that happens again, you should talk to a lawyer. They cannot just do whatever they want. Several people thanked me. As I was leaving, Janet Liu caught up with me. Mr. Stanton, I just wanted to say I am sorry about what happened with your motorcycle. I voted against the towing at the board meeting, but I was outvoted. I appreciate that, I said. Patricia can be very strong-willed. She does not always listen to other viewpoints. Some of us on the board are trying to make things better. The policy changes are a good start. I hope so. And between you and me, I think Patricia might not run for re-election next year. This whole situation has not been good for her. I nodded. Maybe some good would come out of this after all. Over the next few months, the HOA did send out a survey about parking rules. The results showed that a large majority of homeowners wanted the motorcycle restriction removed. The board held another meeting and voted to eliminate Section 4.7, subsection C entirely. Motorcycles were now allowed in driveways, as long as they were properly maintained and not leaking oil or causing other problems. I started parking my Ducati in the driveway again, right where it had always been. Nobody said a word. In February, the HOA held elections for the board. Patricia Whitmore did not run for re-election. Janet Liu became the new board president, and several new members were elected who promised to be more responsive to homeowner concerns. I felt like justice had been served, not just for me but for the whole community. Standing up to the HOA had been stressful and expensive, but it had been worth it. Sometimes you have to fight back against people who think rules do not apply to them. But then, in March, almost exactly a year after my motorcycle had been towed, something unexpected happened. I came home from work one afternoon and found Patricia Whitmore standing in my driveway, looking at my motorcycle. I pulled into the driveway and got out of my truck slowly, not sure what to expect. "Can I help you with something, Patricia?" She turned to look at me, and I was surprised to see that she looked older and more tired than I remembered. "Mr. Stanton, I owe you an apology." I was genuinely shocked. "Excuse me," I said. "I owe you an apology. I handled the situation with your motorcycle very badly. I let my personal feelings about enforcement get in the way of following proper procedures. I cost you time and money, and I cost the HOA money too when we had to settle with you. I was wrong. I did not know what to say. I appreciate you saying that. I am not on the board anymore. I have had a lot of time to think about my actions over the past year. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, enforcing the rules for the good of the community. But really, I was just on a power trip. I like being in charge and having people listen to me. And when you challenged me, I dug in instead of admitting I might have made a mistake. Why are you telling me this now?" She looked down at her feet. "I am in therapy, actually, working through some things. My therapist suggested I make amends to people I have hurt." "You are at the top of that list." She looked back up at me. "I really am sorry, Xavier. You were right and I was wrong, and I am sorry it took me so long to admit it." I studied her face. She seemed sincere. "Thank you, Patricia. That means a lot, actually." She nodded. "I will let you get back to your evening. I just wanted you to know." She turned to leave, then paused. "Nice bike, by the way. My late husband had a motorcycle. He would have appreciated this one." Then she walked away down the street toward her house. I stood there in my driveway for a long moment, processing what had just happened. I had spent so much time being angry at Patricia Whitmore, seeing her as the enemy. But she was just a person who had made mistakes, just like everyone else. I went inside and told my girlfriend Felicia about the conversation. We had started dating about 6 months earlier, and she had heard all about the HOA saga. "Wow," she said. "That took guts for her to come apologize like that." "Yeah, I was not expecting it." "Does it change how you feel about everything that happened?" I thought about it. "Not really. She still did what she did, and it was still wrong, but I guess I respect her for owning up to it eventually. You did the right thing fighting back. You protected not just yourself but other people in the neighborhood." She was right. If I had just paid the $400 and moved on, Patricia and the board would have kept doing the same thing to other people. By standing up and forcing them to follow the law, I had made things better for everyone. A few weeks later, I got one more surprise. I received a letter from the new HOA board. Inside was a check for $1,200 and a note from Janet Liu. "Dear Mr. Stanton, after reviewing the details of last year's incident with your motorcycle, the new board has determined that you were not fully compensated for your damages and inconvenience. Please accept this additional payment as our way of making things right. We are committed to being a fair and transparent HOA that respects the rights of all homeowners. Thank you for your patience and for holding us accountable. Sincerely, Janet Liu, HOA Board President." I called Robert Chen to tell him about it. He laughed. "Well, that is a first. I have never seen an HOA voluntarily pay additional money after a settlement. Janet must really be serious about changing the culture there. Should I accept it? Of course. You earned it, and it sounds like it is a gesture of good faith on their part." I deposited the check. Between the settlement and this additional payment, I had actually come out ahead financially, even after paying Robert's fees. But more importantly, the whole ordeal had taught me something valuable about standing up for yourself and not letting people in authority positions abuse their power. My Ducati continued to sit proudly in my driveway, a daily reminder of the battle I had fought and won. Every time I looked at it, I felt a sense of satisfaction, not just because I had won the legal case, but because I had made a difference. Neighbors would occasionally stop by to look at the bike and to tell me their own HOA horror stories. Some of them had started standing up for themselves too. When Eric got a notice about his lawn being a quarter-inch too long, he pushed back and the HOA backed down. When Teresa's daughter visited and parked on the street overnight, nobody towed her car. The new board was actually following their own rules and treating people fairly. Sometimes I would see Patricia Whitmore in the neighborhood. We would exchange polite nods or brief hellos. There was no animosity anymore, just an understanding that we had been on opposite sides of something and it was over now. I actually felt a little sorry for her. She had invested so much of her identity in being the HOA president, and then she had lost it all because she could not admit when she was wrong. But mostly, I just felt grateful. Grateful that I had the resources to fight back. Grateful for Robert Chen's help. Grateful for a legal system that, despite its flaws, had ultimately worked the way it was supposed to. And grateful that I lived in a country where you could stand up to people in power and have a chance of winning. One Saturday afternoon in May, I was out in my driveway washing my motorcycle when a young couple walked by pushing a stroller. They stopped to admire the bike. "That is beautiful," the man said. "Is that the Ducati that caused all the drama last year?" I smiled. "Yeah, that is the one. We just moved in down the street. Everyone told us about what happened. That was really cool how you stood up to the old board." "Thanks, just trying to do the right thing." The woman leaned in. Can I ask, was it worth it, all the time and stress and money to fight them? I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Absolutely. Sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. They thanked me and continued on their walk. I went back to washing my bike, the sun warm on my back, feeling completely at peace. The whole experience had started with anger and frustration, but it had ended with justice and positive change. My motorcycle had been illegally towed, but in the end, the HOA had paid the price. They had been forced to compensate me, to change their policies, and to acknowledge their wrongdoing. Patricia Whitmore had lost her position of power and eventually found the courage to apologize. As I dried off the Ducati and stood back to admire it gleaming in the sunlight, I thought about how this whole thing could have gone differently. I could have just paid the $400 and swallowed my pride. I could have moved the bike into the garage and let them win. But I had chosen to fight, and that fight had mattered. The laws protecting homeowners from HOA overreach exist for a reason. Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 33-1803, is there to prevent exactly the kind of abuse that Patricia and her board had committed. But those laws only work if people are willing to enforce them, willing to stand up and say no when someone with a little bit of power tries to push them around. I was proud of what I had accomplished, not just the money I had won or the satisfaction of proving I was right, but the lasting changes I had helped create in my community. The new policies meant that other homeowners would not have to go through what I went through. The new board leadership meant that people's concerns would be heard and addressed. And maybe, just maybe, Patricia's eventual apology meant that she had learned something too. As the sun began to set that evening, I rolled my Ducati into the garage and locked it up for the night. Tomorrow I would take it out for a long ride through the desert, feeling the wind and freedom that came with two wheels and an open road. But tonight, I sat on my back patio with Felicia, drinking a beer and watching the Arizona sky turn orange and purple. "You know what the best part of this whole thing was?" I said to her. "What?" It reminded me that ordinary people can still win against institutions that think they are untouchable. It reminded me that the law matters and justice matters and standing up for yourself matters. She squeezed my hand. "You did good, Xavier. You really did." I smiled and took a sip of my beer. Yeah, I thought, I did. And that $40,000 Ducati sitting in my garage was not just a motorcycle anymore. It was a symbol of a battle fought and won, a reminder that sometimes you have to fight for what is right, and that when you do, you just might win. The neighborhood continued to improve under the new HOA leadership. Janet Liu proved to be an excellent board president, transparent and fair in her dealings with homeowners. The monthly board meetings became actual discussions rather than lectures from on high. Homeowners felt heard and respected. The compliance sweeps ended, replaced by a system where violations were addressed on a case-by-case basis with plenty of notice and opportunity to fix issues before any penalties were imposed. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that David Morrison, the HOA's attorney, had sent a memo to all his HOA clients after my case settled, advising them to review their enforcement procedures and make sure they were following state law. My case had apparently become something of a cautionary tale in the HOA management world. Robert Chen told me he had gotten several new clients who referenced my case when they called about their own HOA disputes. In a weird way, having my motorcycle towed had turned into one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not because of the money, though that was nice, but because it had given me a sense of purpose and accomplishment. I had stood up to bullies, fought through a complex legal system, and won. I had made my community better, and I had learned that I was capable of more than I had thought. Felicia and I got engaged in July. We planned a small wedding for the following spring. As we talked about our future together, buying a bigger house and maybe starting a family, I knew that the lessons I had learned from the HOA battle would stay with me. Stand up for yourself. Don't let people push you around. Know your rights and be willing to fight for them. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do is also the right thing to do. My Ducati remained my pride and joy, sitting in the driveway whenever I was home, a bright red reminder of everything I had been through. I kept it meticulously maintained, washing it every week, checking the tire pressure, changing the oil on schedule. It was more than just transportation or even a hobby. It was a symbol of freedom and individuality, of refusing to let others dictate how I lived my life. On a warm evening in September, I took Felicia for a ride through the desert outside Scottsdale. We cruised along the winding roads as the sun set, the engine purring beneath us, the wind rushing past. She wrapped her arms around my waist and rested her helmet against my back, and I felt completely content. When we got back home and I parked the bike in the driveway, I saw Patricia Whitmore sitting on her porch a few houses down. She waved at us. I waved back. There was no anger anymore, no resentment. Just two neighbors acknowledging each other on a beautiful evening. That night, as I lay in bed next to Felicia, I thought about the journey I had been on over the past year and a half. From the shock and anger of finding my motorcycle gone, through the frustration of dealing with Patricia's intransigence, the stress of the lawsuit, the satisfaction of the settlement, and finally, to this place of peace and resolution. It had been a roller coaster, but I had come through it stronger and wiser. The next morning I woke up early and went for a ride before work. The desert air was cool and crisp, the sky a perfect blue. I opened up the throttle on a straight stretch of highway and felt the Ducati surge forward, the speedometer climbing past 80, 90, 100 miles per hour. The power and speed were exhilarating, but what really made me smile was knowing that I had fought for the right to enjoy this moment. Nobody had given it to me. I had earned it. As I rode back toward home, slowing down as I entered the neighborhood, I felt profoundly grateful for everything that had happened. Yes, having my motorcycle illegally towed had been wrong and infuriating. But it had also been the catalyst for positive change, not just for me but for my entire community. The old HOA board had been forced to confront their abuses of power. New leadership had taken over and implemented better policies. Neighbors had learned they could stand up for themselves. And I had discovered reserves of strength and determination I hadn't known I possessed. I pulled into my driveway and shut off the engine. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. Kids were getting on school buses. People were leaving for work. The normal rhythms of suburban life playing out all around me. My motorcycle sat in the driveway where it belonged, where it had always belonged, where it would continue to sit for as long as I owned this house. Justice had been served. The HOA had been held accountable. The system had worked. And I had learned that sometimes fighting back is not just about winning, it is about standing up for principle, about refusing to accept injustice, about making things better for everyone who comes after you. That $40,000 Ducati Panigale V4 had become priceless to me, not because of what it was worth in dollars, but because of what it represented. Freedom, justice, the courage to fight for what is right, and the knowledge that ordinary people, armed with the law and the determination to see things through, can still win against those who abuse their power. As I walked into my house to get ready for work, I glanced back at my motorcycle one more time. It gleamed in the morning sun, beautiful and defiant, a permanent reminder that I had faced down the HOA Karen, taken them to court, and emerged victorious. They had towed my bike illegally, but in the end, they had paid the price. Justice had prevailed. And every time I looked at that motorcycle sitting proudly in my driveway, I was reminded that standing up for yourself, no matter how difficult, is always worth it.